when when Bitcoin says, what are you going to do about it? There is nothing that they can do but embrace it and corrupt the message, which is what Coinbase successfully did. So, this is natural. I don't feel as down, that it's as unlikely to happen. I think it is going to happen, whether it's us or whether it's someone else. I would be equally happy if it was another project that had the right virtues, and I
Right.
would follow them.
But that's
I
the
don't
indicator.
care.
But that's the perfect indicator that you're doing it for the right reasons. That you just want it to happen. You honestly don't care who enables it to happen. So that's because you're
If
obsessed
it's
with
us, if it's us, it's great.
right,
It means that we didn't waste all of our time. But if
right.
someone came out tomorrow and had a solution that enabled us all to be self-sovereign, to own our own data, and to exchange value, whatever that value was, between us, each other freely, without needing to report everything to the surveillance state, and without having to pay 30% commission to tech bros, I would join them. And I think everyone in this room would. Like, why wouldn't you? Especially if you were safe and secure, and like the Stephen Deal says, you had no risk of losing your life savings. You could recover those if you did make an error, or if you were attacked for any reason.
I also have a question that I've been having conversation with people like my husband and even Alexandria a while back. So, there is a lot of education that we need to have so that people purely understand how this cryptocurrency, different coins, and others work. And one of the things I usually get messed up is also how we say Bitcoin. And if we're talking about currency is a medium to be able to exchange goods and services. You pay for goods and services. It is a medium, but it's not an asset class where you actually hoard it in a sense of thinking it would have a value at some point so that you create some kind of wealth. But then Bitcoin has been used as, I see my cousins here in the US actually right now saying that, oh no, you gotta have Bitcoin because it's gonna rise. You're gonna get, some kind of return, huge return, to be left behind. And there is euphoria in some circles. And to me, it's like when you are looking at things that way, you are thinking as investment kind of vehicle, like investment asset class, not
I agree.
necessarily a currency that you exchange, like a US dollar. I wouldn't, put US dollars in my checking account because it's gonna have no additional value in a while, right? In fact, it may lose its value because of inflation or something like that. So
Hmm.
I sometimes get really confused that how did Bitcoin actually start as a currency, as a coin, like as a currency, like cryptocurrency, as a
Hmm.
medium for goods and services to an asset class, or why it's a murky situation for some people. They see it as an asset investment class. For others, they
I'll
see it as a
let
medium.
me let me give you a quick answer to that. So, the best way to answer the question is that Bitcoin is a medium of exchange. It is a unit of account, and it is a store of value. At the moment, in its iteration, it is regarded as a store of value because whether it's a good store of value or a bad store of value is a separate argument. But the reason why it's regarded as a store of value is that it is independent of all the other systems. When you're talking about currencies, you don't hold a currency or right as an investment because you believe that the currency itself will appreciate. You don't expect the dollar to go to $1.50, but it trades relative to other currencies based on what it represents. The dollar represents the output of the US, but it also represents a quadrillion dollars of other investments that are outside of the US, because it acts as a reserve currency. It acts as a reserve currency for the world. So dollars price, as you rightly say, goods and services, and it prices about currently, I want to say 60% of the goods and services in the world. Some people say between 40 and 60% of all the goods and services in the world are priced in dollars. Now, when people invest in currencies, which is a good time to be investing in currencies now because it's a very good relative game. If you look at dollars versus euros over the last year, the dollar has appreciated by 20% against the euro because the dollar is regarded as a safe haven currency in times of distress. And so more money flows into the dollar and the dollar strengthens versus the euro. So if you would have held dollars, it would have been a good investment. And now you might think it might be a good time to be buying euros because you believe that it will mean revert back to its normal level because at almost parity to the dollar, the euro is very weak. So when you're talking about currencies, they are usually looked at relative when you look at a basket of goods and services being produced. Bitcoin, as you rightly say, produces no goods and services other than security for the holders of that asset. And the way to think about it is that it is in the minds of Bitcoin holders, because value is always in the minds of people. In the minds of Bitcoin holders, it is that it is digital gold. It is something that can withstand the slings and arrows of economic fortune. My personal belief is that it is a prototype that illustrates trustless, permissionless, unstoppable networks where humans can collaborate wherever they are to agree on a ledger of value. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's more that it shows that we don't need to know each other to create a currency that goes above the nation state and that goes above the GDP of those countries. And so it illustrates that there is something we can do to connect to our fellow man, regardless of our national tribalism. And what we will see is the evolution of Bitcoin, in my opinion. And that evolution will solve many of the problems that people have posed with regard to currencies. But it's really about saying the meme behind Bitcoin is Chancellor on brink of second bailout. That's the Genesis message from Satoshi. And that's telling you that if you can no longer trust your governments to do the right thing in respect of supporting the nation, buying out banks that have misbehaved, bailing out lenders who have not done the right thing, then it's time for people to work using software with other people and not be bossed around by corporate titans or self-interested politicians who really just want to get re-elected and are not behaving in a way that protects you as a citizen and a dollar holder or a euro holder.
Well, I agree, but I think at some point, if you are depending on a software, someone is in charge of that software. You are not really
No,
truly
that's not true.
decentralized.
That's not true. That's not true.
Well,
That's missing the point.
can I
That is the
finish?
entire point, Messi. That's the entire point.
Bitcoin. Yeah, that is the innovation. The game, it is very subtle and it does take some time to get your head around, but that is the very innovation. It rests on the shoulders of what was done before in open source software development, which is a system, a cryptographically provable system in which many people can collaborate on a software project. But, as you quite rightly say, in open source software, one or a small group of people have complete authority to make changes. Now,
Exactly.
those changes can be detected by other people in that software project, but not prevented. This is not the case in Bitcoin. You cannot, what we in software development would call force push in Bitcoin. To understand why, I can't give you a 2-second answer. There's at least a triumvirate of power between the miners, the node operators, and the exchanges. Well, there's a lot of different centers of power, and the way the game theory has played out, and the way the incentives work for all sides, mean that no single actor that's out of consensus can make a change to how it works. And this has been proven time and time again. I've sent you a good book in the back channel called The Bitcoin Standard, which will give you a very nice history of money and where Bitcoin is in that phase. If you want to see if you get interested and you want to read an entertaining book about people trying to change Bitcoin, read a book such as The Blockchain Wars, for example. And you'll see that every other coin is an attempt to, not every, but a lot of coins are based on the same principles as Bitcoin and are effectively software forks and is an attempt to change or improve Bitcoin. But just have a look at things like the blockchain wars in the book I sent, and you'll see how difficult and unfeasible it is to make those changes because of the way that those changes need to be firstly adopted, developed and pushed out. Then they need to be adopted by miners. And then the miners have to start running that software, and then the node operators, people like myself, who sit with copies of the blockchain, actually have to accept those changes as well. So there's a perhaps the only stable shape in nature is a triangle. Any stability comes from a triangle. Any other geometry is unstable. We have that triangle in Bitcoin that ensures that there's push and pull required to keep the thing stable. So can't really explain it in less than about 6 hours. My recorded sessions on Clubhouse get somewhere close to explaining it, but frankly, they only scratch the surface. But it is not true to say that anybody can just change it.
No, I'm not really implying that anybody can change it, but I'm trying to simply say that I have heard some really big supporters of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are saying it's truly decentralized. And I'm just simply saying, yes, you would have, checks and balances like what you just explained, that one person is not going to be able to, push changes. But at some point, some group of people are really looking after it or making changes or things like that, or even if it's stored in whatever in the cloud, whether it's Amazon, wherever it might be, somebody has access and somewhere has been stored.
Sorry to interrupt,
So
but
I'm just simply saying that it's not truly
not
truly decentralized. That's all.
It is, because there's approximately 100,000 nodes running Bitcoin around the world, and a lot of them are in people's houses. They're all over the place. It is not the sort of thing you need to run on an Amazon instance. It's not like that. It's not like Ethereum. It's not like other things. I'm standing 50 centimeters from a Bitcoin node as it happens as I speak to you, and there's about 100,000 of them around the world. They are all independent copies of the software in consensus. There is no one place. And when you try and change it, a lot of things come into play. It gets changed all the time. We just had a major upgrade called Taproot. There's been SegWit. There's been a lot of upgrades to the system, but they've happened through a very clever mechanism. But to understand the subtleties of how that works, I wish I could sum it up in a nutshell, and maybe Nicholas can, but I can't get people to understand that without several hours of building blocks first. So.
Okay, moving along. So that's the top story of the day. The battle over the future of how the government will deal with blockchains and whatnot. And part of the problem is we are still in the process of developing the language. So what I mean is we need a convenient term for the cohort who represents, and Nicholas has, the surveillance capitalists, but something tells me that might not stick permanently. For the crypto side that is basically capitalism 3.0 or whatever we want to call it, and
scammers.
Yeah, it's a lot of scams.
Tech bros,
crypto bros, whatever. And then we actually desperately need a term for the white hatted, Robin Hoodish, Satoshi-ish.
cyberpunks.
I guess, but believe it or not, it's actually inevitable and rather important that these terms get defined. And
Jedis.
Tyler, there was a conversation where I remember Jorge a while ago was just like chatting briefly, but it kind of got glazed over about what you were just describing about the black hats and the white hats, and recognizing that this is an interesting dynamic, as Nicholas and Ben have always been saying. And I've seen this quite a lot as well, is that it's a bit of like good versus evil. And you're seeing it dynamically play out, but it's also changing the way people perceive.
Right. Well, fundamentally,
how they engage with something of value, right?
To really boil it down to its essence, you're either motivated by money or financial kind of greed, or you're motivated by freedom, essentially. And
correct.
Right, and that's the key distinguishing variable between the two camps. Because the technology can do both, and some
Well,
people
is it freedom? Is it freedom alone, or is also the ability for us to be able to take responsibility of those tasks that actually we've given up control ourselves by giving our data away and all our like we're trading in convenience. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, when you start to
Well,
see
it's
certain
still
things, it's
financial. It's
convenient.
financial freedom because you'll still be able to see everything on the blockchain. So
Yeah,
even though you
it's
might not know whose
totally.
wallet it is, you
Yeah,
still
it's
have
all
access to the.
I
You
my
mean, it's
actually
point
have
all
access to more
transparent for sure.
information.
my
Yeah,
point
it's all transparent.
is that Nicholas is motivated by he's on team freedom rather than team greed, and there's a whole lot of team greed out
I've
there.
been on Team Greed. I've been on Team Greed before. So I think the big thing is this. If you've been on Team Greed before and you realize that it's a nil-sum game and that at the end of the day, if you get too rich, your children are going to screw it up. They're going to get it. There's no winning. The only way you can win is if everyone wins and we all grow together. And so it's really about understanding the value of the collective. And it's really following in democracy and freedom and empowerment and realizing that our own experience is limited and that it's our children and our grandchildren, our future generations that will not know free will and will not have conscious agency in the future. They will just be fed information like you see it now, how people are just listening to garbage, whether it's from the mainstream media or from, fringe media. They just cannot discern truth. So the real the thing I'd never understand about the tech bros is they've got enough money. They
Right.
could donate and they could build public infrastructure that they would be remembered forever. Like you see, the names of, Henry Hudson or whatever, whoever the heroes are of America or wherever it might be. They could be those guys. They've got enough money. They've got enough cars. They've got enough houses. Why don't they just contribute to a public infrastructure project? It baffles me that they're so greedy.
Right, and you raise an interesting point in saying that, because the window of opportunity is not infinite, because the states could eventually adopt a Chinese like posture and squeeze us out, uh, where it would be rather difficult for China to pull off what we're hoping to pull off in the West still. And the fear is that the West could adopt Chinese like policies with regard to blockchains and everything, and essentially snuff out the flame of opportunity that still exists here to break us all out of this kind of government led system.
Well,
They've
yeah.
just trapped us in
If you
this
look at
nil-sum game.
if you look at, I think even in this room that we have talked about it, in Africa, it really is a big mess because, and this is why some governments are like taking into matters into their hands and fully banning it, like Uganda that we talked about, because a licensed business actually embezzled millions from really not high income people, thousands of them, not just one and two here and there, but thousands of them. And then they start lobbying the government to crack down. And then without having, a very, how do I say, a well thought out framework on how to do this regulatory reform. So they just came out with a straight full ban in the entire country. There has been another one. One, the Central African Democratic, they came up and they say, we're gonna make it fully legal and the stuff. And I also wonder if they don't have a very good framework on how it's gonna work or how they're gonna have oversight, and then it could happen the same way it happened in Uganda, and then the government will react. In South Africa, just a year ago, the two brothers have a good platform for buying and selling and trading cryptocurrency, but then they disappeared with billions, not millions, billions of it. I don't think they are still found that. So when you have these types of high profile things happening in the continent, everybody is like, okay, we have to be careful. And like you say, Tyler, that the window and the perception and stuff is not going to be a good one. And you miss the opportunity where it could be one of those good innovations that can help Africa. But right now it's a mess.
Right. So I want to raise an interesting point that Nicholas just raised, or follow up on Nicholas's point about the opportunity to be a crypto messiah of sorts. And there's a guy named Daniel Burr, who I follow on Twitter, who his Twitter bio I'll read for you now. It says decentralized identity at Block, meaning formerly Square, meaning Jack Dorsey's fintech company. And then it says started decentralized identity at Microsoft, fought for the web at Mozilla, and what's interesting is reading his tweets, he says things like this 1 hour ago. That gotta hand it to Vitalik, the brains behind Ethereum. It probably required excellent time management to write all those posts and papers on the ill-conceived, needlessly blockchained, Black Mirrorian anti-patterns of soul-bound tokens. And he's aptly criticizing Vitalik's ill-conceived notions around
naivete, I would call
yeah,
Vitalik.
Okay, fair enough. Around identity on Ethereum, essentially. And Nicholas has done the same. And Daniel and Nicholas are actually quite similar in many of the points that they raise around criticizing people for needlessly controlling things and trying to tokenize identity and all of the shenanigans of Web3, the regular rigmarole. Now, he also has said recently in a tweet that I will pull up for you now, that he's basically, he says, me trying to keep from spilling the beans before June 9th. And it shows a photo of a kid who's exploding, basically, and meaning he has something huge he's going to share on June 9th. And he works at Block. Now, is it possible that Block, Jack Dorsey's fintech company, that Elon buying Twitter, turning it private, that they then could, I know this might be naive, but then somehow refinance Twitter to be a, I don't know what to turn it into, a non-profit of sorts. I don't know what to even call it. Similarly with Square, because there's another guy who works at Square, now known as Block, who's one of the top 3 guys at Block, who did a tweet recently saying, and I'll have to dig it up, that essentially they're completely reinventing themselves. And he says, there's basically, he can't imagine any other company in the history of tech totally taking what was a totally awesome functioning $50 billion company and just completely reinventing itself for some bigger purpose. And he says that's what they're working on right now, and he can't wait for people to see what it is. And it sounds like Jack has been bitten by the crypto messiah bug and he does have enough money, and he has a couple of lieutenants there who seem excited about using their skills and resources to build financial freedom. And that
this is just a narrative war. At the
I
end of the day, Block has shareholders, right?
I get that.
So Block can't go and give it away.
Well,
if Elon were to give Twitter away,
yes,
literally give it away,
right,
and then empower it with a cryptocurrency, he would have to find a way to keep the lights on and pay all the bills and pay all the people that work there, and he would have to do everything to go counter to what everybody who's working there. So when you get someone who's working for Block, right,
yep,
that's the immediate contradiction, is that if you really believed in what you were doing and you were going to do it the right way, you would understand that you cannot be a corporation and achieve your aims, because a corporation has to be sustained through the injection of capital, and the people that work for that company are expecting to get paid in dollars,
Right.
and are expecting to have contracts that are financeable so they can continue to pay their mortgages, etc., etc., etc. So, it just makes no sense. It's going to be telling a story where they're
Yes.
going to pretend in some
Tyler,
way
Unless Jack
that
is
this is
Tyler,
bankrolling the whole thing out of his war chest.
Tyler,
he doesn't have enough
That
money.
is what he's doing.
what's Tyler? What about another unique hypothesis, which has to do with it being the possibility that it could be converted into a DAO, that the block could actually be converted to a
Right.
DAO?
That's what I'm implying, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
No
meaning
such
where
thing as a
where
day.
like to what Nicholas was saying, by making it a decentralized autonomous organization, he makes everyone take ownership of their own ability to contribute to the governance of block, right? But he would have to make it a decentralized organization first.
But he
So
would
that
also have to give.
The,
He would
the,
have to
the,
also buy it out and give all the shareholders their money back. And he'd
Correct.
have to, and furthermore, he would not be able to. He would not have a protocol that would sustain their business, and he would lose all of his fiat regulatory approvals. He would
Right.
lose everything that makes for Block what it is. Block is a centralized
Great point.
fiat on ramp. That's all it is.
Yes. I'm just saying,
So
like, reading the tea
he would.
leaves between
They
the.
want to tell that story. Yes, you're
I,
right. Look. Jack is a false prophet. Balaji is a false prophet. Chris Dixon's a false prophet. And what happens is that they're all pretending. In tech speak, you would call them LARPers, live action role players, right? And they're followed by a whole bunch of NPCs who are basically just FOMOing because they don't understand how the technology works, and that's fine, right? That's what drives speculation, drives adoption, and drives development. But ultimately, the technology has to be owned and ownable and runnable by everybody in the world on the lowest cost unit of computing power, which is a CPU. That's what has to be the technology that wins, because the person in China, the person in Russia, the person everywhere in the world has to be able to join in and get their fair share of the network based on their contribution. That's what it has to be. Otherwise, it will end up suffering from the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. And if you start off, and if it's a proof of stake chain, for example, if you start off with 20% of it that you're giving to VCs and 15% that you're giving to the founding team and this amount of dev rewards and this, that, and the other, the compound effect means that those starters of the network will end up controlling the network, which means that you're just back to the JP Morgan scenario. And I work for those greedy pockets, and they're never giving up power. So to your original point, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have to evolve to understand that the solution is one where there is no center. That's how you protect yourself. That's what censorship resistance is.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, but how do you build a system like that, Nicholas, without
Oh,
the normal
that's another room.
traditional ways?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a big question. So we'll pause that thought for now. This we got to go into the second biggest story of today, which is that the Supreme Court of the United States blocks Texas's social media content moderation law in a 5-4 vote, putting the measure on hold while a constitutional challenge proceeds in a lower court. The Supreme Court blocked the Texas law that critics say would fundamentally transform Twitter and MENA, aka Facebook, because it reminded me exactly what the Twitter law was about with regard to content moderation, that they can't silence Republicans, basically, is what it really boils down to, wasn't it?
That's correct. So the Republicans wanted to sue Twitter and the like to be able to say what they want, to avoid being silenced. They initially had won in the lower courts, and now the organizations have won in the higher courts to rescind that law and continue to allow organizations to silence bad actors.
Right. Now, on that point, I found something truly interesting. My dear friend Jane Wong from Hong Kong, who I'm going to ping in for you. She used to join us in the early days of tech news, and it's been a while. So let's see what Jane's up to. And it's very late in Hong Kong, isn't it? Let's give it a try. See if she'll hop over here in Clubhouse. So Jane is a researcher who finds what Twitter and Spotify and everyone's working on before they release it. And she's often very more than anyone the source of knowing what those teams are working on before it's ever announced. And she's one of my favorite Twitter accounts to follow because she's leaking stuff on an almost hourly basis of what these companies are working on behind the scenes. And she found something that Twitter's working on a few hours ago, where she says, Twitter is, I'm going to retweet it right now to the Tech News Twitter account so you can read her tweet. It says, Twitter is working on, quote unquote, content control tools. For what it appears, it'll provide a more official way for third parties. That means anybody. It means your mom. To enhance the experience within the Twitter app, including letting third-party tools, that's like some app your mom made, provide custom timelines for Twitter users. That means your Aunt Betty's app could make their own unique version of a Twitter timeline. That means an algorithm, folks. There's a follow-on tweet from Jane, which says, I'm particularly curious if Twitter potentially letting third-party tools dictate the timeline, it might allow users to pick their own quote-unquote algorithm, not just Twitter's home timeline algorithm. Oh, Jane. Oh, you did it. Oh, Jane, we did it. We did it. This is precisely what I predicted would happen. That Jack is obsessed with getting out of the content moderation game. It's a lose situation. You can't win that game because you got Republicans on one side and Democrats on the other, and you cannot please both camps with your content moderation policies because they're so divided. So he wants to step away from that, and the solution that he hinted at himself more than a year ago in a very subtle tweet that nobody ever picked up on was the idea of an app store for algorithms so that you could pick which algorithm filters your Twitter experience. That Twitter would stop hiring thousands of people to silence and mute and hide and shadow ban and all that bullshit, which gets them in nothing but trouble, and that they could be neutral, as they should be, as a protocol, just like the telephone companies, and then everyone could be their own radio station and could decide their own playlists. That they are just in the business of, they're the record store, but you end up listening to DJs or radio stations, and then you're going to pick which radio station you want to listen to, and you might change radio stations every 20 minutes. That's up to you. You can change which algorithm. Now, Jane is basically...
It should be reminding you of privacy. It should be reminding you of the privacy controls on Google and Facebook. They will give you all of those things. The question is, will you use them?
Fair enough, but my point is, Jane has now found evidence that they are working on precisely this, as I said they would do.
It's the right thing to do. The problem is that you cannot get away unless Elon was to take it private and then to make it, to somehow get it out to the public, because otherwise there would still be the allegations and there would still be you'd have to enforce people to choose their own algorithm, right? Because otherwise the set algorithm will have bias.
No, there's no bias. It's just chronological. It's purely based on who you follow. Unfiltered chronological, or reverse chronological, technically. And then they would say, hey, you can have the default chronological unfiltered fire hose, or you can choose your own filter or algorithm or whatever you want to call it, and you can switch between filters and algorithms anytime you like. And you can have the New York Times filter so that you only get really far left obnoxious woke shit, or you can follow the Fox News filter and only get the alt-right full-on Nazi bullshit and everything in between.
By the way, did you see that Elon tweeted how to change your timeline feed about 10 days ago?
No.
So, just for the room, if you're on Twitter and you see the stars in the right hand corner, you can click those stars and you can have the reverse chronological feed, or you can have the designed for you feed. So
Right.
he actually tweeted that out about 10 days ago,
Yeah.
advising people that they could do that.
I
So I
caught
think that
that.
might be some pre-priming.
Right. And I even said that part of the discussions behind the scenes are between Jack and Elon talking about precisely this algorithm content moderation solution, which Elon mentions quite regularly about how they're going to fix moderation. And every journalist is like, how the hell are you? You have no idea how difficult it is. And even Twitter employees, who are current employees, took to their Twitter accounts to say, how dare he assume he can come in here and fix content moderation? We've been working on this for 20 years. And you think you can just jump off of the fucking park bench and jump on into the NBA All-Star game and start playing around when we've been thinking about this for 20 years? No, it's because he's talking with Jack, and Jack's known the solution the whole time. But he knew that the current people playing at the park are not going to be down with how Jack wants to do it, and that's why they need to sell the company and shake the Fruit Loops loose of the tree. But Elon's on board with it. That's why he's confident about it, because he knows once he does this, you'll get more advertisers, not less. Because the problem is, you're going to moderate it wrong, and you're going to scare all the advertisers away, and you're going to turn it into Elon Town, and you're only going to moderate the stuff that you like. He's like, no, I'm not going to do the stuff I like. I have an idea of how to do it in a very fair way. He does. Jack does too, but they're being very kind of hush-hush about it in the back. And in the same way that I figured this out a year ago, I believe I've also figured out what he's going to do with Square and Block. And I know it's batshit crazy, but hey, I just know how to connect dots.
It's not batshit crazy. Both of those things are predictable. The problem is that they don't actually solve for the real
Maybe
problem. They
we don't know
solve
yet.
for
We don't know yet.
a
You're right.
perception problem.
I concede that we don't. It hasn't happened yet. It's it's in the future. We'll see when it gets here how it plays out. And you're right. It might things never go according to plan. That's for sure. I'll happily concede that point. So, but this content control tools is what they're being called inside of Twitter to allow third parties to control the content. Say what? So third parties are going to be moderators now? What on earth is this about? We will find out soon. And there will be unintended consequences. You can rest assured on that. Okay. So the next big story is from Wired that messaging apps should consider reviving AIM's away message to create better social boundaries around people's time as people treat the apps like live chats. So this is an interesting social, anthropological, tech anthropology point around how tech is shaping society yet again, where we all feel like we can reach each other on an instant because of the way that the instant messaging apps are designed, with the read receipts and all this nonsense. And this writer from Wired, Lauren Good, is saying we should bring back AOL version of how they designed their app because it didn't put the burden on the receiver to respond instantly the way that it was designed. Okay, well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's an interesting point about how I find these kinds of points always very interesting, tech anthropology, about how apps and technologies shape society. And instant messaging is, in a weird way, shaping society in an always-on 24/7 culture, especially work culture. And you're getting countries passing laws saying that employees have a freedom to not be contacted after 5 p.m. So, the next story is... No, by the way, on that topic of read receipts and always on and blah, 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 you have WWDC coming up next week, the Worldwide Developer Conference from Apple. One of the big potential reveals at that event, seems very subtle, is the idea that Apple will embrace the new kind of SMS 2.0, RCS or whatever it's called, which has read receipts, basically. It's like it's what basically all the instant messenger apps use, with the exception of Apple iMessage is a real notable a laggard in not adopting it. And if they did, then it would play much nicer with all the other messaging apps, and that would be great. And of course, they're not doing it because of a strategy they've locked in, and it keeps people locked into their ecosystem and their devices with all the blue bubbles and everything and their chat message thing. So, but if they do adopt it, and they really should, by the way, that will have interesting implications, and they've been debating that internally for a decade. Anyway, so the next one is Nikkei Japan says they have sources that in a first, Apple will move some iPad production from China to Vietnam. Say what? After Shanghai's lockdowns disrupted production for months. Yeah, I'm sure that's why they're doing it. Sure, that's why they're doing it. Of course, it's because the Shanghai shutdown disruption supply. Sure, of course. That's why Apple's moving production out of China. Right. I'm sure that's why Apple's stepping out of China. Of course, it's because of the disruption of the shutdown. It couldn't possibly be anything else. That we said this would happen almost a year ago. And now here it is. It's happening. It continues to happen. Just as we said.
Tyler, what are you alluding to?
What do you think I'm alluding to, Annette? It's called de-risking.
For everyone else listening.
Yes, okay. Nice softball tease up. So, for those who missed the rant multiple times over the past year, if you're not a regular tech newser, the prediction was that Apple, very notably, and everybody's going to all the big American companies are going to have to step out of China and become less dependent on China. And simultaneously, China is stepping out of and becoming less dependent on everybody else. There's this grand decoupling going on. And Apple stepping out is a big part of that. So we said that they would do this. And they have to do this, actually, because there's a risk that China could try and nationalize Apple's business interests in China. And Apple understands that. Apple is vulnerable, and the U.S. is reminding Apple of this on a daily basis. And so, to be continued.
Well, do you think that this has anything to do with China announcing that they will only use Chinese software and computers in their country?
China's making multiple announcements simultaneously around shutting down open source, and China, as usual, understands these issues before all the other countries combined, and China understands threats. China's paranoid, and for good reason. And it's not unfounded paranoia. And no, I don't think Apple stepping out of China is related to that. I think Apple was going to step out of China regardless of that. They've been consistently, not slowly but not quickly, de-risking their position in China for the past year now. And it will continue until there's very little of it left there that they don't mind losing. That's just how it's going to play out. So the next is from the Financial Times. An investigation details NSO Group's severe financial troubles. That's the group that made Pegasus, the spyware that was a massive kind of fiasco when it was revealed that Pegasus, this app, is embedded on a lot of people's phones without them knowing it, including Jeff Bezos, by the Saudis, no less, which led to his divorce, the largest of all time. And Pegasus can be installed on anyone's phone without them ever knowing it. And it has, including Macron's and many heads of states and everything else. And it's this Israeli startup called NSO Group has Pegasus. And now the Financial Times does an investigation detailing NSO Group's severe financial troubles, because once it was revealed that this app even exists, it made it harder for NSO's clients to do business with them, because now it's kind of being done more in the open because of Apple, honestly. Because what Apple's doing is, Apple got very embarrassed by this because it shows that Apple is a bunch of Swiss cheese. It's got, you think that it's secure. It's not. There's big glaring holes. and open doors that thieves can walk into and get all your juicy, sweet, sweet data, and they can't stop it. Of course, they're trying to stop it. They'd love to stop it. They would do almost anything to stop it. They can't.
That's the paradox, right? The paradox is what NSO does is it shows that the reason why you can do all of this is because they're doing it. If they
Right.
weren't doing it, it wouldn't be possible. So the problem
True.
is you have to make NSO the scapegoat. Everyone focuses on them, but the truth is there'll be another NSO because as long as Apple and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook and Twitter need your data to make money, they will have all the data and all of the background information that's on your phone. So it's just it's just a whole bullshit story. It's
Right.
just
But
narrative and politics.
yes. Now, where it gets interesting is Apple hasn't been able to fully defeat Pegasus. However, they know that. So what they did come up with an interesting baby step solution, which is they did update iOS around 14.5 so that it can detect Pegasus on the phone and then alert the Apple user that their phone has Pegasus on it. And that's a nice thing to have, is to know that your phone has Pegasus on it, even if Apple's not able to remove it. And Apple's alerting people that their phone has Pegasus on it, and they're even telling them who put it there. And this happened in Thailand a few months ago, where one morning 5 different notable Thai people tweeted photos of the messages they received from Apple, all simultaneously the same morning, saying that your device is compromised by Pegasus, and basically the Thai government is hacked your device because you are a critic of the government.
So at the end of the day, the real question is when Apple finds a solution. So this is going to be cat and mouse because Pegasus or another will find a way to, secrete themselves within their system because if you're taking that data, there's still data or there's still a honeypot to go after and people will go after it. So that's number one. Number two is it just so happens that the surveillance state requires the surveillance capitalists to also have this because they are doing what Pegasus is doing anyway. Pegasus just tried to do it commercially, but
Right.
all of the governments of the world are using the Swiss cheese of the iPhone to track everyone and to spy on them anyway if they're a person of interest.
Right. Um, yep.
Tyler, would you mind if I bring up something that we were talking about a little bit earlier, which I think kind of ties into this idea of person of interest? I think it was
Yep.
Ben who mentioned, why people aren't going out there and creating these technologies and become, when we were discussing crypto. I'm not sure if it was Ben or Nicholas, but I think that this is a good point as to why these, multimillionaires or billionaires aren't trying to revolutionize certain things, because then they become targets and people of interest. And if you look at history and what we've done, as people that have typically moved societies forward, we wind up then excommunicating them or killing them, like throughout. I know this is
Start
like
with
an ancient.
Galileo.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that has a big part in why people don't want to put themselves out there or make themselves more visible. I do this with a few of the people that I work with, where I make them stack soda cans on top of each other, and everyone does like a different design or what have you. And then I asked, what's their natural reaction to it? And some people would want to like check out how other people have built it, but most people just naturally want to knock it down. And I think that says a lot about human nature, that most people just want to knock each other down. So why would you put yourself at risk in putting yourself out there to try to make something better when there's really no reward back to you other than people trying to knock you down or you becoming a person of interest?
So I
So
think that's, I just to answer that question because we're in that exact position. So Satoshi used a pseudonym because he understood that from the beginning. The issue is if you use a pseudonym,
Exactly.
people don't trust you, and so some people have to dox themselves. This is where the only place to emerge for this technology is in Western liberal democratic societies because we have the constitution that entitles you to certain freedoms. And so free open source software qualifies under the First Amendment, free speech,
Well, I
and you
understand
also
that, but my point is that people are still going to
no, but
shoot
I'm
you
just
down. Like,
so
look
just
at Elon
no,
Musk, look at
absolutely.
Bill
No, hold on,
Gates.
hold on, hold on,
Go
hold
ahead.
on.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. What I'm saying is the only way you can protect yourself, like Satoshi did, but without using a pseudonym, because you need to gain people's confidence that you are qualified to do the job that you're doing, right? Is that you use the free. That's why it has to be free open source. It can't be, owned by anyone. It has to be. It has to have a fair launch. It has to have these key features. For the exact reason is that even though I'm known and the lead developer is known and others may be known in the community, we cannot be oppressed because we don't have control of it, because we can't stop it, because it is free open source software and it is just words. All right, software is just made of words. And so as long as we have those rights, and that's why it is that scene from Star Wars where the doors are closing and Harrison Ford and Chewie are rolling under the closing doors, right? Because once you lose those rights, and that's what sort of comes up with the Texas incident, for example, not the shooting, the legal incident with Twitter, is that once those doors close on you, and there is no real free speech, and there is no privacy, because you've given it all up, because you're using these friendly, smiley-faced apps that are spying on you, that the government want to, surveil you, right? Then the game's over. So it is a limited window. Yes, if you could be pseudonymous, you stop yourself from having aggravation, but you miss out on being able to popularize what you're doing. But what you can use is the Constitution, and you can advocate for free open source software that enables you to resist being othered. But yes, people are at risk who are building this because the government does not want this to happen, and the surveillance capitalists don't want this to happen, and the VCs don't want to help you either because they would rather invest and make money than actually help evolve society because they have other vested interests. That's always the problem I've got with Elon. Is Elon's got so much business in China, he's got so much reliant on the US government with SpaceX. He's never going to be able to do anything unless he makes it fully open source and donates the whole thing and makes it all free open source software, which would be amazing if he does that. I would change my opinion on him if he were to do that.
Can I add
And
an
then
opinion
what
here?
about Apple? When are we going to call out Apple? Because its whole marketing push is privacy. And that makes it, in some ways, the worst offender.
Well, it
Why
Well,
are
was.
the
we singling
cleverest.
out
It,
Apple?
it was no. It because Apple used to, prior to Pegasus, Apple used to sing a big song about their the one of the reasons you pay so much for their devices is this privacy, 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 all caps, bold, 50,000 point font on the Megatron screen. And ever since Pegasus has come out, they've only done really one big keynote event since then, the big September iPhone launch event that we watched, and I was specifically watching to see how many times they mentioned privacy because they normally do it about a dozen times in every one of their big annual marketing events. They mentioned privacy only once in a whisper in the middle of a sentence. So that was kind of the first time that they had removed it, as they must now do, from their
Oh,
marketing
so
mix.
they're done. They're done with privacy.
They
Yeah, I
can't.
would I would say it's more of a trying not to be a target. I mean, I think the minute they start, they tout that that they have privacy, they become a big target. I mean, we all want to pick on Apple here, but quite frankly, the Android operating system is probably the worst system out there from a privacy standpoint. But we don't talk about it. I think it's just everyone wants to talk about Apple because they're so successful. I guess I
No,
don't.
I
I mean,
think people do. I think you're right. Android is a leaky bucket as well. The difference is that people trust Apple. Apple has the highest trust rating of any brand, and this is why they've stopped talking about it because they've been shown that it's not quite true. And their privacy means it's private to them. It doesn't mean it's private to you, right? And they're supposed to be protecting you, but it turns out that they're not really protecting you because the government's always been able to surveil them, and Pegasus went through the same route. And now they're going to close the door. The question is, will they close the door to the government too? And my viewpoint is they won't because they're bringing in money onto their system and the money requires total surveillance.
Okay. Next
yep,
up.
and that makes sense. One thing that people should think about is we keep on talking about open source here. Just a comment. You know that China's been shutting down some open source repositories.
Yeah, I just sent it
Open
5 minutes.
source is going to be one of the biggest surveillance tools out there, and it already is.
Yeah,
And you've probably already seen indications of it where people who run these open source projects add code because nobody reads this code, right? I mean, it's a ton of source code. Nobody reads it. So if they put in a Trojan horse, here you are installing it in your software. Open source is really a detriment to a lot of software projects out there, and it's going to be worse. And I think that's why the Chinese don't um, want to limit and control it so that they don't get a lot of open source software in all these software projects they're developing internally in China.
they're paranoid, and now they force review all of it. Yeah.
Yep,
Can
and
I
we don't
add
do
a
that
little bit?
here.
Can I add a little bit to what Nicholas was saying about the
Sure.
open source connection with the Star Wars analogy and Chewie and Harrison Ford rolling under the closing gates? When democratic free will, or forget the democratic part of it, if we just say free will, when free will slash open source gets so caught up with the emperor and all those oligarchs or even communist China, etc., and we're all rolling out under the closing doors. And it shuts down because that paradox of how open source can be such a force for good is no more. We have to go back to the movies again to remember that the force does prevail in the end, and there is the opportunity that people like Nicholas that keep moving towards this identity platform that will allow us to all own our sovereign identity, etc., etc. Because that has got to be the way it goes. The thing is, we've got to be prepared for the long haul, and that the common good will rule in the end, or will come out tops in the end. So I'm still hopeful. I won't be here for it, I don't think, but surely that's got to be the way where it's going. Thank you.
Okay. So the next one is that Twitter says it will close TweetDeck for Mac on July 1st, but they're going to have an alternative. Safari now has an estimated billion users, making it the second browser to pass 1 billion behind Chrome's now 3.3 billion, but far ahead of.
Isn't Safari powered by Google? Isn't that the $10 billion annual payment that Safari receives?
No,
That Safari pays?
Safari pays for the search. Sorry, Google pays Apple to have Google as the default search in Safari.
Yeah, sorry.
So,
But it is Google. But it is Google behind Safari.
no. WebKit? I don't think so. Who builds WebKit? I think it's open source, no? Who owns WebKit? There it is. It's the default search. Apple. WebKit is a browser engine developed by Apple and primarily used in its Safari web browser. So it's based on their own thing. The next is about the MENA 1, a privacy-focused $369 Android smartphone that replaces all Google apps and services with its own custom versions that are quote-unquote private. There it is. People are now selling privacy. It's like the hot new feature. The next is from Vice, a look at Discord's outsized role in the crypto and Web3 communities as the platform Discord struggles with rampant spam, phishing attacks, scammers, and malware. It is. It's sort of the Grand Central Station of Scamville.
It's terrible. It
And
really is. It's horrible.
Web3 generally is coordinated through Discord, which is kind of like a mixture of chat and voice. It's not quite social audio, although they do have a little of that functionality as well. But it's where communities get together online to
Tyler,
discuss. Yes,
if you had to recreate, and I know Annette's going to jump on this one, so I'm open to hearing it. If you were to recreate Discord to make it more efficient, what would be the three things you would say have to change?
I can't give a qualified answer. I've only used it for a very limited.
Annette?
Well, first and foremost, their search function is just terrible. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Discord? Do you use it at all or no?
Yeah, I've been using Discord for like over 6 years. So yeah, I'm definitely a nice Discord user. That's why I'm asking, because it is something that I've heard a lot, and I'm quite curious to disrupt it. What would be required to disrupt it? So the search feature bites the big kahuna. What are the other two things as a
The
new user?
people, the
Yeah,
people.
Well,
exactly.
the toxicity of
The scammers.
Discord, the toxicity of Discord is unfortunately coming from the fact that it was a heavy platform for gamers to communicate. So it's really a hybrid of like Slack and a chat function, like a Slack in a live stream.
And
Which
now
You
it's a
need a
heavy
great moderator. You
platform
need a
for
great
Web3
moderator.
yeah,
scammers.
that's
The
Yes.
moderator the moderation
I
is
love when
really
I
good.
start getting messages on all channels that are listening in the audience that are like, this sucks, this sucks. So, yeah, please DM me what you think sucks about Discord. I'm quite interested to hear it. And I'm serious
Yeah,
about it. And thank you, Nicholas, because I do recognize that as well. There's the moderation element of it, which again goes back to decentralizing moderation. That's kind of what it looks like when moderation is decentralized, right? Because
it needs moderation like what happened with Reddit, which finally made Reddit usable.
yeah, and that was a
Yes,
while ago when
yes.
Reddit was made
We,
usable.
we, we
Well,
manage our whole community on Discord and we have like 14, 15,000 people. And the key is we have the most unbelievable moderator. And the other big thing is keeping out the scam bots. So
Yeah,
the bot functionality on there, unless you have real skills in terms of developing your own bot scanning, which
yeah.
we do, it's a full-time job to keep bots out and scam bots out.
Yeah, that would
Does
be my number two and
verification,
three for
does
sure. Bots and
verification,
scammers.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Nicholas and Annette and the others that have, does verification of your phone number help? Because I know they don't use phone numbers from like apps that are like Viber and stuff like that. They actually need an actual phone number. They don't accept phone numbers from like voice over IP. So
Like
with what?
2FA, you're talking about?
Yeah, like a 2FA or some sort of security protocol, Nicholas, because outside of like your fantastic den mothers and your den fathers, that are super expertise, I think that that's also a level of emotional intelligence. It's like herding cats inside Discord. So I'm curious because I don't think Discord's going anywhere, but I do believe that Discord is on the verge of being disrupted by someone that's absolutely fed up with the way Discord's been operating as the space is getting more people into it that engage more with organizations, having more community experience, like Nicholas and his 40, 50,000, like Annette with her Open Galaxy. They're just more savvy people coming in that understand the nuances of what needs to be done when managing a community or leading a community. And I'm very curious as what are the top, well, I mean, I'm already hearing 3 or 4 of them. So, but I'm always welcome to hearing them as well.
I
Feel
think
free to send me
Clubhouse is
thoughts.
working on something now that will
For
do
Discord?
something like no for Clubhouse, but it will lure people from dis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of the reason I'm asking is because I am heading to New York City to hack at Ethereum, New York City, and I will be I will be wanting to solve problems, real life problems for the space, right? And this is something that Dr. Francine and Annette and Nicholas and everyone that's used Discord in the audience and followed by the listeners, this is a problem that's been having for a while. And the only way that it's going to be addressed is if someone is able to go in there and understand the problem and disrupt it. Like Dr. Francine, you're saying, Clubhouse is doing that, but they're also quite a small team, Clubhouse. But when you have the ears of folks that actually are experiencing this through their NFT drops and stuff, I do believe that they'll take it a little bit more seriously when it's coming from those people like myself that have heard it from like hundreds of NFT artists and NFT drops. And the biggest complaint is the bots, the communication channels, the scams, the ability to possibly even shut off completely direct message. Like you don't really need to have I don't think you need a direct message feature inside Discord, but I don't know. Those are just a few of the thoughts that are popping in my head right now.
or maybe the NFT drop itself is a scam.
Yeah, I think we
Well,
have to
then there's a
remember
lot of
that
people that
Discord.
love those scams, Cheryl. There's a lot of people that love
Yeah,
those
like you
scams.
spend 6 years there. What a time.
Oh, yeah. Needless to say, non-fungible tokens are not scams. They're all in the value that you build in the community. And it's really not very nice or very respectful to start digging on people or dinging on people for what you think you might know or not know. I think it's really disrespectful and shows a lot of immaturity.
I think one of the things that everyone should remember is that Discord was around long before NFTs, and it was really around the gaming community. So
10
it's
years
built,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it is built for the gaming community, and that, I think it was Dr. Francine who mentioned Reddit. She's right on. Like everything that I agree with you, Dr. Francine. Everything that you've said about Discord is
Yeah,
100%.
Dr. Francine's been around the block a few times. She totally gets it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Discord way predates anything to do with Web3, and it's only relatively recently that it's really captured that whole ecosystem.
Well,
So,
I think it's because they go together, right? Like NFTs really are, even though the gaming community doesn't like NFTs or NFTs within gaming, I think it's kind of like the same people who are utilizing both.
mhm. Okay, next up is TikTok is testing clear mode feature. What is clear mode? It removes all auxiliary information from the window experience. So it's distraction-free scrolling by removing the username, captions, audio information, and more. The kind of overlays on top of the videos, the TikTok videos that you're scrolling.
Tyler,
TikTok.
isn't that vertical? Isn't
That's
that
interesting.
Mhm.
vertical screens like that they're using? It's the whole screen that they're going to start using. I know there was a TikTok influencer on Clubhouse that was talking about this from Asia, that he said that they're making the whole screen visible now, where like they will take all those distracting features away, and that's one of the things that they're working on next. And I'm wondering if Instagram will follow in suit.
It would seem to me that would take the mimesis away because if you don't see who's tweeting it, a lot of or talking it or whatever you call it, posting it, then it will lose the virality for some people. I think who posts is important in those maximally mimetic
I think
networks, is it not?
they'll make it some kind of easy gesture to return that if you want it, right? But and some people are tweeting some interesting points. Like Chris Messina says, at least Creative Commons stood for attribution and fair use. TikTok is like, yeah, we're good. Like we don't need to attribute anybody for anything.
That's funny that they say that because, of course, all of it is generally ripped off content except for the true UGC content.
Right.
It's very strange.
And then somebody else tweets out saying that record labels like to tell people that you need to go viral on TikTok to be successful. And TikTok says, let's remove all these annoying artist names and song titles. So, yeah. It'll be, The question is they're clearly favoring the content consumers more than the content creators in doing this. I think they've done yeah.
Or it is the phase that we know that we're moving towards, which is that they know more about what sells and they know what to up promote and down promote or whatever else. And they can also replicate content. They can create,
There you go.
synthetic stars.
There
So
you go.
once you get people, inured to the fact that they need the creator to be, Billie Eilish or Charlie D'Amelio, right? They can just create their own content and slowly wean you in your feed because you're being fed this information and foie gras you to their delight.
Oh, Jesus. We should create a new TikTok clone with a goose as the icon, as the um, oh dear God, what an image. Yeah, Blipverts, if anyone remembers Max Headroom. So the Nicholas is right. We're approaching synthetic content. where the algorithms will manufacture the content, that you won't need human content creators. So yeah, then you won't need attribution anyways. And
This is also what Facebook is doing with the direction that they're going. That they're creating all of the tools so you can make content like this.
but this is also an interesting decision from an app product perspective, because the fear is that it will scare away content creators. But if it gets people to watch a lot more content, it might not. And the comparison that comes to my mind is Booking.com versus Airbnb, because Booking.com hides your brand and everything else, but it gives you a lot of bookings, and then you they they completely favor the buyer in that marketplace more than the seller. They don't give a shit about the seller at all. It's all about the buyer, and by servicing the buyer, they get all the buyers go to Booking.com because it's a better experience for the buyers. And then because they have all the buyers in the marketplace, well, then here come all the sellers reluctantly dragging along because they're greedy at the end of the day and they want to be in front of the buyers. Airbnb is the other way around. Airbnb as a marketplace favors the sellers, and they delight the sellers, and they make it the best place for the sellers. And so they have a ton of unique exclusive sellers, and that attracts a whole different cohort of buyers who want very unique sellers in the marketplace. And so it's two very different approaches. And in doing this, TikTok is much more favoring the consumer or the buyer more than the seller or the content creator, is one way to look at it. I would say Twitter emphasizes the seller in a weird way, actually, comparatively. The next is Microsoft updates Surface laptop. Who cares?
Unless they don't like the seller.
Precisely right, Heather. As long as we like what you're selling. The Ofcom survey of 6,600 UK adults. This is the chance to play our favorite show. Is Messi still with us? She is. Messi, good to have you back. Let's play Tech News Jeopardy. Here we go, everybody. So here's the question for today. Out of a survey of nearly 7,000 UK adults, which gender are more likely to face abuse or harmful content online?
Women.
There's
Female.
only two,
Women.
right?
Had to
Women.
be.
Women.
Women.
This might be a Tech News first. Everyone was right. Everyone gets a point. Well done. Everyone got it.
1, 2, 1, 2.
The easiest Tech News Jeopardy we have ever done. It says 42% of women felt comfortable speaking freely online, implying that 58% do not. The head of media
I would have
regulation.
lost on the percentage.
Yeah. The media regulator Ofcom says tech firms must do more to protect women online after its report revealed they were more likely to be victims. Did somebody actually spend money on that? That would be my question.
I think I read an article yesterday that there was, I don't know if it's the first, but a reported rape on the metaverse.
Yeah,
There you go.
you mentioned that. Yeah. And what happens if you get pregnant in the metaverse?
Does it, how does
I
that?
remind
Sorry.
you that
Digital
a
babies.
woman complained that her avatar was raped in Meta's metaverse.
Yes.
But at
Yeah,
least,
that.
Tyler, you will solve the
Give birth to
shortage
pixels.
of midwife issue.
Um, I may sound
Well,
really
let's hope
dumb.
she's not in the metaverse version of Texas, because then she'll be forced to carry the digital baby too.
How does that happen? I'm sorry.
Well, if you're in Texas and you're raped, you
Joe.
can't have an abortion. So if you're in the metaverse version of Texas and you're raped in the metaverse version of Texas, you might have to. You're not going to be able to get a digital abortion.
So
Wonderful
there's a
art of putting
business
two and two together.
opportunity in Meta for abortion providers.
Yeah, midwives, we have shortage already. Go to the metaverse.
But can
Hey,
I
but
ask
this
a
is
really
good.
dumb
When you deliver,
question?
there's no pain.
Can I ask a really dumb question? How do you get pregnant on the metaverse?
By being raped.
But
So
why
you are
on earth
not
people just
you are
wear all
not
the
You
clothes?
physically
don't.
pregnant,
But
are you?
Messi, do you know that
He's
men will get
joking. He's
pregnant in the
joking. He's just
metaverse?
joking.
Men will get pregnant in the metaverse. Do you know that, Messi?
Okay, so we are talking about still on the metaverse, not physically, right? So
Hmm.
I'm just trying to understand the Tyler's explanation of not being able to abort if you are in Texas. So
It's a
the
joke, Messi.
yeah, okay. I was just trying to figure out if that's for real
It's a
because there
complicated joke, but it
It
does
is.
tell you
It's a
that
very
women
it's a
are
very
at
meta joke, is what it is.
yeah,
a
yes, but
metaverse
Boo.
joke.
women
Okay.
are at a disadvantage even in the metaverse because we carry our universe attitudes over into our behavior in the metaverse. I think that is the point.
The joke was on him because actually it was a man that was purporting to be a woman and who was homophobic. So in fact, it backfired on him.
Yeah, so you see, this is also one of the things about the Web3 and the metaverse, right? So you can be really anybody, especially now if there is no identity check. So you could have any identity that anybody creates. So it would be, yeah, that would be like, I just wonder if it has any kind of mental implication. Like my husband and I were talking about it yesterday when reading that reported metaverse rape, and I was thinking, okay, the physical rape does have a lot of scars, mental and physical, and I wonder what is the implication of the metaverse rape.
It's people coming into your virtual space and invading your boundaries. And if you're sensitive to that, it can feel to somebody as if they're being quote unquote raped. But you can't really be physically raped. Someone could have a rigged animation that animates humping or whatever. I'm sorry if I'm offending people. But it's not real. It's virtual.
Yeah, and why Dr. Brown, remember that was announcement that it employs some kind of distance system or mechanism, right?
Yeah, Meta has that. When I don't go into Horizon World anymore because there's just too many kids. But the last time I was there, it was all these kids running into my space. Now they have barriers that you can put up so people can only get within, a meter or so of you. Um, I don't know. I mean, people do respond to this very, that there's a kinesthetic thing that goes on for some people where it feels very real to them. So, they can be offended and can be hurt. Doesn't bother me. It may bother other women. So that's it.
Okay, here we go. Next up.
Well, it makes me laugh, but I realize that this is how out of touch I am with how younger women feel about their space and their rights and all of that. I had no rights and no space, so I can't get triggered by anything. I couldn't, but now people can, and
Dear Dr. Francine, I'm sure you remember the days in Second Life where women would get pregnancy attachments and they would go around and their bellies would be talking, I need vitamins and things like that. It was all very bizarre.
yes,
Although, sorry, go
but
ahead,
that
please.
but those were that was still a different time. This is the time of, I hate to say it, wokeness, and everything today is a microaggression. And I try to respect that as much as I can, but I cannot say that it was ever part of my lived experience.
Ditto.
Although, if I may, I think there is one interesting note here. There may be studies that link even something as innocuous as a VR experience could be, in some ways, sufficiently analogous, at least in terms of the brain activity, so as to create a certain kind of trauma. So, if
That's
there
what I
is such
said.
a study, yeah, or in the future, that would most definitely be a thing. So, I think in all honesty, it might be shocking for a lot of people, but it's nice to see that they at least added that barrier, kind of a facepalm moment. They didn't add it from the start.
I think
Yeah,
it's certainly fair
vicarious
to.
trauma.
So I think it's fair to say that when you're getting trolled online, it must be, similar to being gang in inverted commas online. Not making not to make the comparison, but it is like being gang raped, where you get, your account, if you say something that is against the party line or whatever else, and then you get this, piling on of trolls. That must, that feels bad, I'm sure, when everyone's sending hate at you. That has a visceral feeling, even though it's not happening in real life. It still feels pretty bad when you get trolled.
Absolutely. No one likes to be denigrated.
I've heard that some people are playing in some parts where they're being chased with an M16 by an army who's viciously trying to kill them and their friends over and over and over.
Tower defense.
It's
No,
called
there in VR chat. I think there are
Call of
people.
Duty.
There are scripted guns that can shoot you and make you crash out of the game.
But the point is that a lot of it is perception, because Call of Duty is nothing but trying to, and it does a surprisingly good job of simulating visually, at least, the landscape of war and being hunted by an enemy combatants who murder you, not rape you, but murder you repeatedly.
If you treat it as a game, I think that's the fun of it.
Okay, fine. This is my point, is it has a lot to do with the person's perception.
100%.
Which
And really that there are some people who sensorially really feel these things in a real way. I have a friend in Munich who she claims that she had an actual orgasm just, in a virtual world with her boyfriend.
Yeah,
So
that's
without him,
possible.
no, without him, he was remote. He was in actually England.
Yeah, that's totally possible. You can even do it over phone calls. You don't need a metaverse.
Yes. Thank you, Cheryl. You are right.
Okay, here we go. Instagram will start pushing Amber Alerts in feeds to notify users about missing children in their area, rolling out to 25 countries in coming weeks. I think that's fantastic, actually, because generally people don't know about Amber Alerts, but that could be a very useful, what interesting way. Oh, you know what that is? I just realized what that is. That's Instagram very cleverly saying, "Oh, you think we hurt kids? Hey, Wall Street Journal." Did Wall Street Journal even cover the story? It hasn't, and it won't. I see what they're doing here. This is very clever. So the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Times, the New York Times went on an absolute spree. In fact, a jihad against Instagram, saying that it hurts kids, that their entire purpose is to hurt your kids. And now you know why Instagram has come out with Amber Alerts, so that anyone who has a missing child can report it to Instagram. Instagram will alert all Instagram users in that area to look out for that missing child.
Although the
Okay,
implementation, sometimes they don't just do one
you,
area; they do a
you,
huge area.
you literally just cut me off at the punchline.
Sorry.
The point is, will the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the ones who were so adamant in their jihad against Instagram that it's in their DNA to hurt your kids, will they cover this story? The answer is they will not. Let me solve that big mystery for you. And Instagram knows they won't. And Instagram did this story just to show you how Hippocratic and hypocritical those mainstream media outlets really are. That's a very cool social good that they're doing, by the way.
I like the way you made the portmanteau of Hippocratic and hypocritic and hypocritical. Sounds like something that only doctors are able to do.
So the next one is documents detail that Russia is trying to buy a whole bunch of VPNs to circumvent their own censorship. It's kind of an interesting article. The CISA says that Dominion's voting machines used in at least 16 states in America have 9 vulnerabilities, suggests mitigation measures.
Number one, don't use them.
Now you know why Joe Biden wanted you to do paper ballots. Do you remember that? And do you remember Donald Trump trying to shut down the Postal Service to stop you from using paper ballots? Do you remember that? Would you like me to find the links for you? Do you really want to know what's going on in America? Do you really want to know why Donald Trump started freaking out when Joe Biden was saying, send in the paper ballots? There's COVID going on. You cannot go to the polling station because we've got COVID. Mail in your ballot. Mail in your ballot. It was the biggest message he's ever had since he's become president. Was the message he had before he became president when he was running, which was just mail in the ballots, everybody, which drove Donald Trump insane to the degree that he tried to shut down the American Postal Service. Do you not remember this? Did you forget this?
And selected post box
Tyler,
offices.
you're forgetting something really important here. That the states that use these machines, they use them for in-person voting as well. So it's not just a question of mail-in ballots. So I mean, you do realize that, right? You're talking about they mail you a ballot and you send it in. It's the same ballot you would fill out if you were at the polling place.
Yes, but you're no longer working on a vulnerable voting machine.
You go to they use these machines to record votes if you show up in person also.
My point is these machines are used exclusively when you show up in person. That's why Biden didn't want you to go to those machines, because Trump
but that's beyond mail-in ballots. That means he doesn't want you to vote. Because
no, he doesn't want you to go to the machines that the Kremlin has fucking compromised, which is how they put Trump in office.
But some states use those exclusively. There's no other options, right?
Right.
I mean, the entire election is done on those machines, so it doesn't matter whether there's mail-in ballots in those states. Am I not being clear?
And then they default to hand counting the ballots. Biden wanted paper ballots hand counted because the Kremlin has hacked the voting machines, which Donald Trump knew, which is why Donald Trump tried to shut down the post office so you couldn't do paper ballots.
I'm not even sure what you're saying about Biden's correct, because obviously Biden and Trump had a different view on mail-in voting. Biden won because of mail-in voting.
Correct.
So I'm not really...
Because the people voting for him were counted. And he knew if his voters went to voting stations that were compromised, his voters would not be counted.
Can I just say something really quickly? So in Colorado, when you go to vote in person, you vote electronically, and then the ballot is printed out so you can review it yourself. And then once it's printed out, you drop it in a drop box in the polling station. So how is that any different from voting? The Kremlin breaking into
in that case, it's not.
Electronic system is irrelevant.
Oh no! Can I break in? Those systems are terrible.
So there's an electronic trail and there's a paper trail.
Yeah, and in that case,
whether you vote in person
this
or
is my
not.
field.
Yeah, in that case, it makes no difference, obviously.
This is Eric. Those machines are not respected by security experts. The hybrid machines are considered highly, highly vulnerable, and they're expensive. The point is, if a person hand marks a paper ballot, then you really have solid evidence that they definitely were paying attention. They know what oval they filled in. If they work on a touchscreen, then you're hypothesizing that maybe they read this little receipt before they stuffed it into the ballot box. You don't really know. And there is some research that indicates that people do not study
Ah,
very carefully.
great point, Eric.
So those hybrid voting machines are considered terrible by my co-authors, for example, Philip Stark,
Right,
who's
Eric.
the world's expert in
So
auditing. Go ahead.
let's take a guess. What percentage of people don't check the receipt to make sure that it's reporting what they wanted? Let's just take a wild guess that it's 2%. 2 out of 100 don't check. With the reality, of course, is that it's 10%. But even if it's 1%, many of these states are won or lost on a 1% margin.
Right. My friend Ted Selker did a study with uh, DREs with a voter verified paper trail, and very few people check. Because think about it, we're trained to
Of
not look at
course.
the receipts because receipts are always accurate, right? Every time you go to the grocery store, how often have you caught a receipt that's not accurate? So we're being trained not to look. Go ahead.
You're just proving my point. Is all you found a good reason why uh, bad actors would want you to use voting machines, or that they could be compromised to a degree where in America is not a close race. America is not a landslide voting environment. It's razor thin margins in many states that determine these elections. The last several elections have been won by minuscule amounts of votes for the presidency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing for people to bear in mind is it's the combination of hand marked paper ballots for able bodied people.
So
And
here's
of
my point.
course, people with disabilities. Go ahead.
Here's my point. That the cyber agency, the CISA, is saying that the Dominion voting system equipment has been exploited, uh, detailing 9 different vulnerabilities. So, not one vulnerability, 9. So here's my point. Do you imagine they told Joe Biden this? Potentially. I'm reading about it on the fucking internet. We're all reading about my Aunt Betty's reading about it today on yahoonews.com. Do you think that maybe Joe Biden got a little head preview about this, a couple years ago? Perhaps. If he
Every
did,
red team ever assigned the project of breaking into voting machines have always succeeded. The California top to bottom review, the
here's my
Ohio Everest study. The point
here's,
is that if you let me just finish this one thought, Tyler, very quickly.
sure.
If you hand mark paper ballots and there you manage the ballots security carefully, and then you have post-election audits, statistical sampling of those hand-marked paper, you can assure that you would discover whether there's an honest error in the tabulation or cheating in the tabulation or scanning. The point is, we shouldn't be trusting the technology at all. You trust the combination of hand-marked paper and statistically valid auditing. That's what makes it secure. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
I'm going to
I'm
tell
Eric.
you, having been,
Hold on. I didn't
I
get to finish
haven't
my
done
point.
this.
I didn't
No,
get to
no,
finish my point. I was waiting to finish the point. I let Eric go first. I'll gladly hand it to you next, Ken. The point is, do we imagine that if Aunt Betty and Uncle Bobby are reading this on Yahoo News today, that potentially the president, the guy who's likely to be the president of America, or both candidates running to be president, that both Trump and Biden had both been told by the CISA, because Biden was previously a vice president, they may have told Obama during his presidency that the FBI, the CIA, and the CISA have said, hey, we know that these Dominion voting machines are compromised, right? Now, if that's true, you could expect some really interesting behaviors if they know that these voting machines are compromised. You might expect one of the candidates to be very in favor of these compromised machines and one of the candidates to be very opposed to the using of these machines. And in that scenario, you would have one candidate rather adamant about using mail-in paper ballots. And you'd have another candidate trying to stop that. And that's precisely exactly what we had in the last election between Joe Biden and Trump, where Biden was rather adamant about encouraging people to do written in paper ballots, and you had Trump trying to shut down the Postal Service because he wanted to force you to go to the polling stations where these vulnerable, compromised voting machines are. Biden didn't want you to do that at all. He wanted you to do that mailed in paper ballot. That's my point. Is I believe they both knew what we're now reading in Yahoo News today. That's purely my point. Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just having done so many elections, and certainly in my earlier life with the older technology, and have seen. I'm not going to get into it here. Every single election, no matter what equipment you use, every single thing can be compromised some way. Okay, there is no perfect. You're just going to try to have as many audit trails as possible. And there was like another point that I was going to make, and I can't even remember that point right now.
Okay.
But okay, I'll come back to it if I can remember it.
All right,
Well,
so
let me
I
just
have a
respond
Me
follow-up.
too.
quickly to that point. May I? It's Eric.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so what I can tell you is you can just about 100% remove any risk of a purely electronic attack using the combination of hand marked paper ballots and statistically valid audits. Then you're forcing the attacker to actually do things like threaten people, and dissuade people from going to polling places, and tell people that their ballots won't be counted, that the post office, the kinds of, but you're at least forcing people out into the open. If you have unaudited elections, then a lot of the tricky stuff can be done on the inside of computers, and so we shouldn't be trusting them. But just because it is theoretically possible to manipulate votes in voting machines doesn't mean that it actually happened, right? So the jumping to the conclusion that the vulnerabilities were actually exploited
Oh,
is also, but yes, I think that the point was that this was a voter suppression, mostly a voter suppression attack that was going on in the most recent presidential
oh, yeah, so,
election
so
in America.
the point I wanted to make, Tyler, the whole debacle that we had in Bush v. Gore in Florida was over, low tech. It was over hanging chads. So I'm saying you could have issues, and that's my point. You could always have issues in these incredibly close elections. I do not care what
I agree.
system, okay,
I agree.
because that
I agree with
that
that.
was
Fair enough.
yeah.
Here, my point is, Trump won the previous. Don't forget, and thank you to Nicholas who found this interesting article from Forbes that the U.S. Postal Service, who didn't like being shut down by Trump, by the way, over mail-in ballots. By the way, that's why he was shutting them down, and they know that's why they were shutting. Trump was shutting down the Postal Service was because of mail-in ballots because he didn't want mail-in ballots. Well, why would he care so much about people's God-given right to mail-in ballot? What's the problem? Why is he so concerned about it that he's willing to shut down the mail service? Think about that for 2 seconds. The answer is very obvious if you think about it clearly. And Trump won the previous election by a miraculous shift at midnight as the votes were being counted. And he won by incredibly tiny margins in incredibly specific counties in incredibly specific states that he needed to get the electoral vote.
Tyler, before you go there, because I mean, let me let's see what some facts. Which is in in every state that has mail-in ballots, the procedures for counting them vary. Some states count them immediately, so they're kind of in the tally. Some of them don't count them to the end, and so that also influences the way that these things get reported. Okay, even if there's no foul play, simply the methodology as to whether you count the mail-in ballots,
I agree.
particularly from early voting, when they come in, or you wait until after the election and you count them later. I mean, so there's all of those, details before we get everybody like, worked up into a frenzy. It's important to know like all of that stuff. And by the way, and I'm not saying you can't hack anything, as I just said you can. The state of Oregon has conducted most of its elections for some time now, almost exclusively on mail-in ballots. Now, that's a mostly Democratic state, so you're probably not going to have too many statewide elections that are close. But I mean, you could have a congressional election or something that's close, and I don't know if they've ever had an issue. So,
I just wanted to say in the last presidential election in 2020, Colorado, 94% of the votes were mail in.
Why is that?
Well, because Colorado actually, even before the pandemic, had a big voted primarily via mail in, but we have a really good system for drop boxes, so it's convenient to go and just drop the mail in off at the drop box. And also in Colorado, those people who are getting their driver's license are, well, this doesn't have to do with mail in, but uh, what was I going to say? Yeah, so when you register, if you're registered to vote in Colorado, I think a few other states do this, you're automatically sent a mail-in ballot. So you don't have to request a mail-in ballot, and you don't have to have a reason to receive a mail-in ballot. You just automatically get it mailed to you if you're registered to vote. And most states don't do that.
Okay.
One
So,
thing that Colorado was ahead of the rest of the nation, and their much more widespread use of intelligent mail barcodes. So, in terms of when someone claims that the postal service isn't going to be safe, knowing that we can track your ballot on the way to you, from where it was mailed to you, and then if you choose to mail it back rather than drop it off at a voting center or Dropbox. But if you do mail it back, that we can track it on the way back. Maybe a good way to give people confidence that actually the postal system is a pretty good way to manage ballots. I'm Eric. Thanks.
The postal system, the U.S. Postal Service, is the logistics backbone of America, and it is the fail-safe system for all of the logistics. It is subsidized by very environmentally friendly junk mail in order to keep this service in order. Trump directly attacked the service in order to weaken the backbone of America, and it was, in my opinion, a full-on attack, much more potentially dangerous than any nonsense insurgency on the 6th of January. That was the true attack on democracy, and people often underestimate because of the way that it is mischaracterized as unprofitable, etc. It was made unprofitable by Bush 1 by saddling it with having to deal with pension liabilities that other service providers didn't have to provide in order to jam through a budget. So there's so much misinformation and disinformation. The USPS is the most valuable or the most undervalued service in America, and it has plenty of technology it can implement. And it's something that we've been focused on, and we will continue to support the USPS.
and Nicholas, just on the pension thing, and I'm sure you know this. That was just an accounting thing. That you could make an argument that the bigger issue was that they have the generous pensions to begin with, not how you account for them. So,
Indeed, you could, but if you're critical workers, and there are 600,000 critical postal service workers, and also a massive fleet of vehicles, and it is truly decentralized and distributed because everybody has a node on the
well,
network
I
called
don't
your
disagree
your
with any
your
of that. I'm
address.
just saying the
I'm just
pension
saying,
issue was an
I
accounting.
agree with you. I'm just saying that it is a massively valuable service that people have been trained to dismiss by technologists. Oh, it's garbage, it's snail mail, it's this, that, and the other. It is essential to the functioning
It,
of
it equalizes
the
it out for
country.
rural communities. Absolutely, yeah.
okay. So the next one that I have today is Anti-abortion activists are using license plate tracking and body cameras to collect data on people arriving at clinics for prosecutions. License plate tracking is actually getting quite big. There's a startup that Sequoia backed recently, if I remember. I believe it was Sequoia. I'm quite sure it was Sequoia. Because as an alternative to facial recognition for police departments and all kinds of community neighborhoods where they can track the cars going in and out and tie it to the identities without using facial or biometric identities. It's car license plate identities, which is very, very close in many instances because nearly every, in America at least, you need a car to get anywhere. We don't use trains or public transportation, so you can pretty much figure out what everyone's doing by the movement of the cars. Anyway,
Abortion program where Uber will give you a free ride.
no, yes,
I
first
mean,
Uber Uber will pay to take you, and then win the lawsuit for giving your information to the Texas government, and then you get a $10,000 bounty for revealing that somebody went to an abortion clinic. That's not even a joke. That's what's going on.
Well, Tyler, that law hasn't gone into effect yet. You're assuming that, I mean, it might, because Roe v. Wade may likely get overturned. But just be
Yeah.
clear, right now in Texas, that law is really, it's been stayed, right?
What I'm saying is this is I'm referring to the Uber nature of this drama. The role that Uber plays in this is not that you would assume, oh, well, if license plate trackers are being used, the solution is very simple. You would use Uber. No, not at all. That's even worse because the Uber driver is going to, take the bounty for taking you to the abortion clinic. That's my
By the
point.
way, Tyler, there was a Supreme Court decision yesterday involving Texas and social
Social media.
media.
Yeah, we read it
And
about 30 minutes ago.
we read it already? Okay, good. Okay.
So the
Yeah,
next,
that,
like
I
Uber.
have a quick question about that Texas law, Americ.
yes,
Does
go ahead.
anybody understand if you're allowed to use this weird vigilante style of law of overcoming abortion rights, how does any right survive? What if Texas decided that my right to freedom of speech, that if I publish an article critical of the governor, that someone can then sue me for $10,000? How does any right survive?
Okay,
It
okay. So
seems
the
weird.
answer to
Thanks.
that question, in order for the Texas law to be valid, the Supreme Court would actually have to overturn Roe v. Wade, which they might do in the next 40 days, whatever. Okay, and at that point, Texas's anti-abortion law can take effect. Right now, Texas and the law that Texas passed would be, in violation of Roe v. Wade, so they wouldn't be able to, even use this private litigation mechanism of enforcement. So the answer to your question is the courts would have to agree to allow states to strip away some of your individual rights before states could create a private litigation path to basically enforce that. You see what I'm saying? So you first have to have the courts allow for your rights to be stripped away. Okay, states just can't do it. I mean, does that make sense?
Except that I've heard abortion clinic managers in Texas saying that they've stopped
Yeah, yeah,
providing
that's
abortion
happened.
services already,
Well, yeah,
except
they're getting
before the
prepared.
heartbeat is
They're
good.
getting prepared. So yeah, so it's had the effect. But in terms of the private litigation, what Texas did that's unique, rather than them like saying we're going to criminalize this and there's a penal code that says if you do this, what Texas did is allow individuals to privately sue other individuals for either participating or having an abortion, whatever, right? um but and so the fact that things are closing there is more in anticipation, right? But that law really can't take effect until they overturn Roe v. Wade. So what I'm saying is whether it's abortion or any other right, you'd actually have to have a situation where the courts allow a state government to strip away what has always been viewed as an individual right. You could be talking about guns. You could be talking about freedom of speech. You could be talking about, almost any other individual right. Okay, but you have to have first where the courts allow a state government to strip those rights away. Okay, so that's really to the answer to your question, because you're saying, what about these other rights? All right, so I mean, if you see what I'm saying, the state government would actually have to strip away. They have to strip away your say freedom of speech rights, and the courts would have to approve that. Okay, if the courts didn't approve that, the law doesn't take effect, and so therefore it doesn't. It's neutered.
Okay, next up.
Thank you.
Podcasts hosted on Spotify-owned Megaphone were unavailable for over 8 hours on Monday night after an early Tuesday morning due to an expired SSL license. So a small startup I've never heard of called Megaphone forgot to re-register their SSL certificate. And you're covering that, right? You're going to cover that story, but you're not going to cover that Instagram is now going to help find missing children around the world. I
I
see
don't
what
think
you
Amber
do.
Alerts are around the world, are they?
No, they aren't today, but through Instagram they can be. That's kind of the amazing part of that. That's the amazing part of that reveal from Instagram today.
Yeah, and Instagram tends to be more international overall, unlike most of the calling Amber programs, which are very localized. So this could be a way to break through some of that bureaucracy, at least at the city level, because I think coordination and quick response is definitely a priority in those situations.
So Meta says it will change its stock ticker symbol from FB to Meta, META, prior to the market opening on June 9th. And Bloomberg says they have sources that the FTC has revamped its Amazon antitrust probe because that's why they hired you, Lena. That's why Biden hired you, was to go after Amazon, and you haven't done it yet. So chop chop.
It's
CNBC
really
reported,
difficult to write a thesis on something and then put
and
yourself
then
into
not
government and
yeah,
then not get sued for
not, oh, I,
bias.
I would just
It's a really
love.
dumb move.
I would love to see the junkets she's getting invited to by Amazon's well endowed lobbyists. So the level of wine being served at that lunch is probably unknown to most mortals. Chateau Rothschilds, as far as the eye can see. So,
Let's
um,
hope she's Muslim.
yeah. Elon Musk says that Starlink 2.0 satellites are amongst an order of magnitude more capable than Starlink 1.0 and weigh 4.5 times more. Okay. Researchers told Microsoft on April 12th about an exploit active in the wild. Microsoft called the flaw critical on May 30th, but still hasn't patched it. Yep. Swiss cheese. Sources claim a fired senior Google researcher spread misinformation on two AI researchers after they declined his bid to manage their project. Geeks gone wild over there at Google campus. And a federal judge rules IBM must pay $1.6 billion for swapping out software. Who cares? A firm makes its buy now, pay later services available to businesses that use Stripe. And that's pretty awesome. So now everybody using Stripe, which is pretty much the whole internet, can now tap into offer buy now, pay laters to their shoppers. And those are your big boring headlines for today, June 1st. So we can now go into the tweets, shall we? So the first tweet.
I have a piece of information.
Go ahead.
So I heard today that Microsoft has finished migrating the Ukrainian government to their Azure cloud platform, and with that, they become the first completely in the cloud government in the world.
Who's that? Who?
Zelensky.
Microsoft has completed migrating the Ukrainian government to their Azure network.
Okay, Microsoft.
Let's hope they never fall out with the Americans.
Yes, GASS, Government as a Service. GAAS, gas.
Hey, Tyler, if I could just for a second, because I didn't even know about that IBM story, just glanced at it. It
Yep.
might be maybe a little bit more significant than we're giving it attention to. You don't expect companies like IBM to do something like that. I mean, you're dealing with like garden variety theft. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not even, I mean, it's not, it's shocking actually.
Yeah.
And, and
Yep.
okay,
I'm with you.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, big companies do really shady shit from time to time. I mean,
We're
urban.
not even dealing with industrial espionage here. We're literally
Yeah.
doing it's even a level above that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing how we've become immune to terms like $1.6 billion. It's like we treat
Yeah.
it like it's $1.60. Okay.
Yep. Apple had a similar punishment around some technology that they were not paying the patent holder for recently. It was ongoing and whatever. Yeah, I mean,
No, this wasn't even that. This was like so. The story, by the way, is that IBM um, was AT&T was a mutual client of IBM and BMC, and so IBM, while they were in there doing their work, legitimate work that they got hired to, swapped out the BMC software for their own software without telling anybody. You see what I'm saying?
hmm
That was the issue. Okay.
okay. And the first tweet that I have for today is Saudamini has this one that plastic packaging might be biodegradable after all because somebody found a PHL7 enzyme was able to fully disintegrate an entire piece of plastic in less than a day. So that's kind of genius. So rather than create new enzymes to dissolve new variations of plastic, let's stick with what's already working with plastic and engineer something that can defeat the existing plastic. That could be potentially one of the most important innovations of our lifetime, is finding a way to disintegrate plastic at the rate that we generate it.
Type of mushroom, right?
The PHL7 enzyme, I have no idea.
Years ago, I think Japanese researchers found a fungus that is able to consume it. So if we're able to get it down to just a molecule, that's even more amazing, especially if it's naturally occurring. Therefore, there's less possibilities for complications or contraindications and that sort of stuff. So that's awesome to hear. Because if anyone's been out in the ocean, just uh, just look around and see that there's you will see a piece of plastic. There's no way to be on the ocean and not see a piece of plastic. So it's kind of messed up how much we've polluted the planet.
Speaking of that, Luis, who listens in the audience, just sent me a video that I think he shot himself in what appears to be California, where on the side of the road in California we have these very large digital signs that the government puts down, or if you have road construction ahead and there's a detour or whatever. And now he has one on video that says "Save water" in both English and Spanish, telling people driving down the highway to save water in California. And it's only June 1st. Get ready, everybody. And we had record rain, to save our asses from the damn near holy cow drought-like scenarios that we were facing going into the winter. But through the winter had record rains that we're very likely not to get this winter. You got lucky last winter is what you got, and you're not going to get it this winter, and you're going to get fucked, and you're all going to have to move. Go ahead, Nicholas.
I was going to say we narrowly averted it. It was about 5 years ago in California, where there was a replenishment of the reservoirs. But I went to see the Hoover Dam and the reservoir that feeds it, and it was shocking how far the level has fallen. I mean, it's shocking when you're there.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So the next one is from Saudamini that TikTok can launch again in India. But can it pass a hurdle? TikTok owners ByteDance is looking to make a comeback to India and is searching for a partner. But here are the details. And you might be wondering, why is TikTok banned in India? Well, let me explain. There was a little border skirmish up in the Himalayas between China and India. People got killed. And India swiftly banned TikTok and all the other Chinese apps, making room for Indian domestic competitors to replace them. And then we had the Indian unicorn boom of 2020 and 2021 of about 100 unicorns, replacing many Chinese previous very popular apps in India. And now TikTok might be able to come back. So the next one is that India sees a 40% surge in hardcore mobile gamers post-COVID. Driven by powerful smartphones, there's been a 40% surge in hardcore mobile gamers in India in the post-pandemic. Yep, that makes sense. Probably globally as well. And Phil has this one from Bloomberg that Elon Musk's ultimatum to Tesla team members: return to the office or get out. The world's richest man appears to have had it with his whole working from home business, telling everybody they got to get back to the office. I believe it's July 1st, or find a new place to pretend to work.
The Gigafactory is too big. He must be feeling lonely.
And
Apparently, he got a lot of pushback on Twitter, and he doubled down on it and was like, "No, I meant what I said."
yeah, he's getting pushback from people who don't work for him. Like he gives a shit what you think. He didn't hire you. You were never going to be hired anyway.
I think it depends on the nature of the work. Like some work can be done remotely, but I think a lot of the work, especially at Tesla, is manufacturing and coordinating on site. So I don't think you can do that
And
remotely.
engineering.
The spray painting booth is extremely hard to operate from the home.
The U.S. Oh, that's an old article. Okay, so anyone else have a tweet today that they want to make sure we get into? French officials told to abandon gaming Anglicisms. Oh boy, here we go. No. Oh God, not
That
this
was a
one
funny
again.
article.
Cultural protection.
Yes. So the French, being so French, are not allowed to use words like esports. You know, a brand new
Or
word that
weekend.
yes, or any Anglicisms, and they must francophone them or francophile them or whatever the fuck they call it. So um, they got to French them up. So jeux video de composition instead of esports. It's a play video competition instead of esports. France, you're becoming known for this silliness. Not in a good way. They're laughing at you, not with you, with this. I don't know why they keep doing this. Anyway, so the next one is the BBC about the Supreme Court blocks Texas's state deplatforming law. We covered that one. WhatsApp spotted testing an option to let you edit messages. A recent WhatsApp for Android beta version has suggested the development of an edit option.
Hey Tyler, let's
Yes.
go back on that Texas thing because it's
Yeah.
really really important. I'm glad
Okay.
actually Jennifer joined the stage because I was about to back channel her on that.
Okay.
It was only a procedural issue that the Supreme Court did. They didn't actually rule on the merits. In fact, I think they actually said in their decision they know that at some point they're going to this has to be dealt with. They probably hope the legislatures deal with it, but they just kind of like they thought it was like procedural. They thought it was a little bit premature. And it was an interesting split among the judges. It wasn't the traditional conservative liberal split. So you had judges on both sides of this. But it gets down to one of the core issues is going to be, are these social media platforms common carriers? Because Texas is arguing in order to even justify their law that they're common carriers. I think that's and there's all sorts of previous case law that goes in either direction on some of this stuff. It also depends. I mean, they're really not an ISP. I mean, I think so. I mean, it's a really complicated area. I don't I personally don't view them as common carriers because common carriers to me always meant just the connectivity, your phone line, your cable line, whatever. But that's going to be a really interesting issue in the next few years. I mean, it's going to be major. So I'll just leave that there. And
Okay. We're ready for more tweets. Here we go. Tesla makes pitch to turn Texas homes into virtual power plants. Tesla is hoping to turn some Texas homes into virtual power plants after tests showed its home batteries can be quickly tapped into to power vehicles. And there you go. You're going to need that because you can't build enough EV charging stations if everybody has an EV. You're going to have to be able to store it at people's homes, and you're going to need to get homes switching over to battery storage at the same time that everyone's switching over to EVs, and build a grid out of them to handle all of that demand, because everyone's going to charge their cars in at about 6 p.m. at the same time. And
it also follows their plan for load rebalancing, and it also follows their plan because they can't store for very long. And it also follows their plan because if they have a Tesla, you'll be able to use the chips on board the car, the GPUs, etc. And it also suits their giant AI program. So it's all part, and plays into Starlink, of course. So he really is doing amazing stuff. Really, how it gets, amazing. Really.
Okay, here we go. The next one is from Saudamini that Fidelity says it will double down on hiring crypto units this year. Says it's looking to fill about 110 new positions in client services, technology, and operations that would also focus on assets beyond Bitcoin. And a patent suggests that Apple wanted to put a camera into the Apple Watch. Apple wanted to put a camera lens inside of the digital crown button. For what God only knows. And Tesla and Volkswagen plan to keep their Shanghai workers isolated even as China lockdown ends in Shanghai. Tesla and Volkswagen plan to keep workers at their Shanghai factories isolated in so-called closed-loop management systems for another 10 days, until June 10th.
If you could pull that crown out and it had some sort of extendable arm, you could imagine that if it had a lens inside of the crown and the crown could be pulled out, you could then turn it towards yourself and then look at the watch, Jetson style. But I don't know why you wouldn't build a camera into the face of the watch.
The next is Singapore tech salaries may soar up to 30% in 2 years. Technology sector salaries in Singapore are set to soar in the next couple of years amid a hiring boom, particularly in finance, according to Singapore. It's going to be because it's going to take over the whole Hong Kong, and it was already on track to be a massive fintech hub for Asia, and now even more so. And Netflix bans more than 1 million subscriber accounts. In a major move, Netflix has banned more than 1 million subscribers to its platform. I imagine because they're sharing the accounts just a little too liberally. And you're going to have to sign back up.
And this is good for Netflix. How? They're already losing people.
Well, they're going to force people who are using Netflix to now pay for Netflix, essentially.
Yeah, but Tyler, there was a story just the other day on this. Where they're testing this out in some of the Latin American countries. They've got issues because it's not clear what the rules are. People are defining household, in different ways. Netflix wants to define it as, you physically have to be sharing a physical space as
Right.
opposed to a bloodline. Okay. But
No.
other people are defining it, hey, my kid's away at school and that's my kid's part of my household, so I can give him the password. And so this confusion is causing a lot of problems in the test market. So they're actually having some difficulty rolling it out in the test markets, which means that it may not be coming to the United States as quickly as people thought.
Yeah,
Yep. And another thing is, when you give people the chance to get off your platform for any reason, they will have the choice to go elsewhere, unless they are hooked to your content. And at that point, you are allowing people to go on their, I don't know, popcorn or whatever that will allow them to get the same kind of content, not legally, but you're just opening the door for something like that. So I don't know. Netflix at this point, I think they need to lay low a little bit and gain customer appreciation again, because over the last few months they have not been in the good light for a lot of people, and trying to police what they're doing right now, I think, is the last thing they want to do, at least at this stage. maybe gain customer confidence again, then do whatever you want.
Next, I have that Alibaba is the best paying tech company in China despite crackdown. Despite China aiming to rein in domestic internet giants, Alibaba is still the best paying tech company in the country at an average monthly salary of $5,000. And Sharon, you had one about Russia. Russia cuts gas supplies to the Netherlands and firms in Denmark and Germany. Gazprom turns off taps after EU moved to embargo most of Russian imports. Yeah, so over the past couple of days, the past 24, 48 hours, the EU is ruling to limit 90%, turn off 90% of Russian energy. And
because they're refusing to pay in rubles, that's one thing. And this is a great opportunity for all the other producing countries, OPEC and otherwise.
Yeah, Sam, your mic is 10 times louder than anyone else's in Clubhouse. It sounds like you
For
got
the first time.
yeah. Just take it out of your throat and kind of move it away from your face by about 20,
I will.
Is this any better?
about 30 centimeters away.
Much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
So Gazprom is now going to retaliate by cutting off supplies to the Netherlands. Good. The planet thanks you. And yes, so I got that one from Sharon, and then Pat has the one about from the Wall Street Journal about missed payments, rising interest rates, but buy now, pay later firms like Affirm, Afterpay, and Klarna grew rapidly during the consumer spending boom. Investors have concerns as outlooks look cloudier. Okay. And Seattle biotech startup, backed by the Gates Foundation, launches trials for snail fever vaccine. What the hell is that?
Right. And so Bill Gates has been adamant about creating a vaccine, the snail vaccine, and he's now launching it. The article's pretty interesting. You should read it through.
The French are lodging a complaint.
Yeah. And what about the Supreme Court blocks the Texas one? We got that. Salesforce to slow hiring and M&A activity after posting strong first quarter results. Yeah, all of tech is slowing down. Nikkei Japan reporting that the nightmare is over. Shanghai ends 2-month COVID lockdown. And Volvo will use Epic's Unreal Engine to create photorealistic graphics in its electric cars. And Star Wars stands with Obi-Wan Kenobi's Moses Ingram amid racist fallout? What is that about? Moses Ingram and Disney have spoken out against the racist response to Star Wars' third sister. Okay. And Denmark to vote on overturning 30 years of EU defense reticence. And I think we've exhausted the tweets for today. Pretty much.
Wait, did you cover the article on Seattle lawmakers pass a policy on setting minimum wage to protect the gig workers
I
and its
just saw.
impact on Uber and Lyft, who've been adamant against such policies?
You'll have to read that again. There it is. Seattle lawmakers passed policy setting minimum wage and other protections for gig workers. And Seattle City Council on Tuesday unanimously passed what is being called a first-in-the-nation policy to create protections for gig workers. There you
Didn't
go.
that happen in California last time?
California had a massive, what do they call those, Ken, when people...
SB something?
A
Resolution?
proposition. They had a
Proposition.
proposition that
That's it.
overturned the state law. So
Yeah.
basically, Uber and Lyft, put that on the ballot, and the voters overturned the state law that was going to, give the gig workers like typical protections of employees.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the weird part was that a
Oh,
lot of the Uber and Lyft drivers don't want to be classified as employees. They don't want to be an employee. They want to be a contractor. And
right, but this new policy would make the gig workers essentially like employees, right? The policy would cover things like setting a minimum wage that accounts for expenses, creating transparency,
Yes.
preventing companies from penalizing workers. This becomes more than just contractual work. And that's exactly what Uber and Lyft have been fighting against. And here we're seeing California push this through. I wonder if at the back of their minds they're thinking, if this then is scalable, perhaps the new avenue of interest is EVs, just to avoid this altogether.
Okay, there's some new ones that just came in. Um, let's see. Oh, the supercomputer, we covered that. Interstellar travel could be possible even without spaceships, scientists say. That would be teleportation, sounds like. That's from Eric.
It's rogue planets. So one of the theories is that there may be artifacts of rogue planets that are not linked to any star, which is one way that civilizations could leave their dying star and reach another destination somewhere else, and generations of humans would live there for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. So it's an interesting idea, especially now in this realm of UAPs. Scientists are not getting so much flack for proposing crazy things, even though they may be remote. I think it's important to examine all the possibilities. So.
Okay, BB
If
just
you
found
take some of those plastic mushrooms, they'll take you to another planet.
a. So BB found this one from South China Morning Post that Chinese scientists may have discovered the vampire secret of rejuvenating old mice to live longer using young blood. The author of the study says previous studies detail rejuvenation process, but not the essential mechanisms, how young blood triggers a response in aged cells.
We don't have Katharina here.
Right.
It's just the vampire description is interesting.
Okay, the new technology helps drones survive strong winds. Well, they already are quite impressive, and at least DJI drones are very impressive in
And
wind.
this one said it can survive those like turbulence or those hurricanes. So maybe it will become some very useful tool to help those like stuck in the hurricane. I mean, to uh, help those in emergency.
Google's here 1/3 of Americans making 250,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck. Wow, they say costs eat entire salaries. More than a third of Americans earning at least 250,000 a year annually say they are living paycheck to paycheck.
Why?
If they live in New York or in Los Angeles, that's entirely feasible.
San
Just
Francisco, sure, yeah.
It's also, I guess, the time, right? We have been away almost a year to Ethiopia, and then we just got here. We're like, oh, holy crap! This thing has doubled. This thing has, we have been really noticing the huge difference coming back and from the price a year ago and now. So I think the inflation is also really a real thing in the U.S., especially now.
Well,
don't go out for dinner.
a related article from BB is from the Wall Street Journal that Google paid 296,000 to a typical Google worker. Here's what other firms pay. Nearly 150 companies in the S&P 500 said their median employees earned more than 100,000. 44 reported a salary below 30,000. So Googlers average about 300,000,
Yeah, 10 times. Wow, 10 times of the other blue.
and they're living paycheck to paycheck if they're in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, you can live in your car. Like there was a feature story where the person was able to save up because they just parked their car in the employee parking lot and they use the facilities on campus. So that's one way to avoid the high cost of living.
So you're saying the renter is the one that takes up most of it?
There was a story about the roller coaster ride. The man who bought a year ticket and then he can have free meal in the parking lot. But he can only do that because his office is near the I forgot the name of the roller coaster theme park. It's in California.
Okay, so I'm now looking at the other tweets that have come in, and we've now essentially exhausted the tweets, except for this last one from Katerina. Unprecedented water restrictions hit Southern California today. More than 6 million Southern Californians will be placed under new drought rules today in unprecedented effort to conserve water. It's the beginnings of the... Ladies and gentlemen, this is something I've been studying for a few years, especially the drought conditions in Southern California. And let me just make it... might be the easiest dot connection prediction I've ever done. Southern California is going to become uninhabitable rather soon. If you're the last one to leave, the price of the land is incredibly high today in San Francisco, as we just read in the last story. That price of that land is going to go down when people realize there's no water. So you might want to sell now, because if you're the last one left holding the bag, there's going to be a decline of buyers and a whole glut of sellers when they realize there's no water.
But Tyler, they can do like water desalination and other things. It's a rich state, so things like that can do that.
I'm from California, Sam. We already have desalination. Carlsbad, California, my hometown, has the largest desalination plant in America. I don't need you lecturing me about that. I can lecture you about that. I already just told you I've been studying this for years. Sam, have you been studying it for years?
Well, I actually grew up in Kuwait, so I know a lot of water desalination plants.
We're talking about Southern California drought conditions. I'm aware we can do desalination. We're doing desalination.
Hey, Tyler, I'm not in a position right now to read it, but I just sent it to your tech news again. It's on my Twitter account. There was an article in the LA Times the other day that some experts are saying somehow California can get around this water shortage. I haven't read it, so you might want to go look at it and see if you want to read it. I mean, I haven't even read the article. I just sent it to you. So
How'd you send it?
it's in the tech news, like direct message on direct news.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Now, the net zero transition, what it would cost, what it could bring, sustainability. Here we go. Fingers crossed from McKinsey. The net zero transition, what it would cost.
No, it was an LA Times article, so I don't think that's it.
Sorry. Okay. Before that one, extremetech.com.
Hold on, let me. I'm like, I can't.
Okay.
I'm driving. I can't do this, so I
Fair
have to
enough.
find it.
I'm with
Careful.
Tyler, quick thing. If it was a landlocked area, like let's say
Arizona.
Arizona, then it would be I would be 100% with you. But California has a lot of coastline, and there is a possibility for getting some of that water. And
Yes.
I'm not trying to lecture you on anything.
Sam,
Think
it's becoming. Are you following the price of energy lately? Yes. In places where, in Qatar, which has the cheapest energy prices in the world, desalination is possible. In places like Southern California, where the price of energy is doubling every few months, it was barely feasible when the price of gasoline and oil was, at record lows. Now that it's reaching all-time highs, it's really not economically viable. And
so usually what the oil-producing countries are doing, the water desalination is actually a side product of distillation of oil, producing gas and stuff like that. It's a side product. It's not really the main product. So in that case, you are going to continue to use, to produce octane and gasoline, all that stuff anyway. So
now watch this. And let me teach you about this, Sam. So, for example, the Hoover Dam, as Nicholas was just saying that he visited recently, Southern California generates a considerable amount of electricity from the dams. these hydroelectric dams. That electricity is the electricity you would use to do the desalination. Do you here see the quagmire of a problem? That the dams that are running dry provide the energy that would enable the desalination.
Yeah, I know. That's a double one.
Okay. This is the problem. It's a desert. Here's the real problem is historically, Southern California was a desert until we built a large aquifer from the Rocky Mountains of fucking Colorado, which are no longer getting the snow that in the Sierra Madres, they're in California as well, that used to get snow, no longer getting snow. That supply and these dams and the energy that they generate are all evaporating. And at a rate that is, if you watch the data very soberly, I believe any kind of sober individual who isn't already living there, isn't heavily invested there, would look at those charts and say, oh, you're going to run out of water in the next 5 to 10 years. So if you live there and you're invested there, like my mother is, like most of my family is, it's not, people who've lived there for 50 years and really enjoy it there find it very difficult to imagine themselves going through the process of relocating. I totally can understand that. But that's why I'm urging people to be the first one out the door rather than the last one out the door. Although, hopefully, if you get enough people leaving, you might have enough water. But yeah, it's going to be very uncomfortable watching what happens.
Kyle, I just sent you the correct articles. Yeah. You should have it now. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, so if it's from the same LA Times, does California have enough water for lots of new homes? Yes, experts say, despite drought. LA Times, California officials have increasingly strict rules on water usage during the latest drought, but they also have plans to allow for more home building. To some, it defies common sense. California is once again in the middle of a punishing drought, with state leaders telling people to take shorter showers and do fewer loads of laundry to conserve water. Yet at the same time, many of the same elected officials pledging to solve the housing crisis are pushing for the construction of millions of new homes. Oh boy, what a lovely predicament. Oh boy. Because housing in California, we just read 3 articles ago, the housing prices are completely unaffordable. People making $300,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck, as we just discussed, largely due to the cost of living in terms of real estate. And so they are demanding more housing to lower the cost of the housing. Here's the problem. Now the politicians have to decide between building more houses when we already don't have enough water. That's a really tough problem. It's the first question I always get, says Jeffrey Neitlinger, who last year...
There's somewhere in that article... somewhere in that article, if you...
let me get to it. He says, Jeffrey Neitlinger ran the Metropolitan Water District for Southern California, the agency that delivers the water ultimately used by half the state's population. How in the world are you approving new housing when we're running out of water? The answer, according to Neitlinger and other experts, is that there's plenty of water available for new Californians if the 60-year trend of residents using less continues and accelerates into the future. Case in point, Angelinos use 44% less water per person annually than they did 4 decades ago, according to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Some of the changes that have freed up additional water supplies in the past and could continue to free up water go unnoticed by many people. New development almost always includes more water-efficient faucets, toilets, applications, and showers than older homes. Other efforts, such as building wastewater recycling plants to increase water supply, might be costly, but are needed to adapt to more severe droughts with the warming climate. The landscape must change too. Think fewer lush lawns and grassy median strips, and more gardens filled with native plants. Quote, the reality is we use water so inefficiently and so poorly, there's so much opportunity to change that, said the chief development officer for the research at the Lawrence Berkeley Livermore Laboratory, which, by the way, is a world-class laboratory. quote, a lot of that opportunity we can use to house people. That's a great point. The Californians historically absolutely waste an obscene amount of water. No question about that.
Hi, Tyler. It's Tina.
Hey,
We know that like people don't use the most of the water in California, though. Farmland does.
agriculture, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I do agree, though, the metropolitan areas that, you know what, San Diego, LA County, or LA and Orange counties, and then the Silicon Valley and maybe Sacramento now that it's kind of largely in, I mean, it's booming for the most part. Are those four areas, I guess, that where people live in California? But and I don't know what's going on with the farming community in California just because we've seen Dust Bowl like conditions for the last 10 plus years. But for the most part, when you look at who uses the most of the water, and I think we've had this conversation for the last year plus, that, you know, we've got 100-year plus, I don't know if they're agreements or, you know, sort of backroom deals that have been made that aren't going to be broken anytime soon in terms of who uses water and who owns the rights to water in California. But I find these articles kind of deceptive in the sense that they talk about like, well, if we could, you know, if we can make sure people don't use water or change their water habits, you know, we can build more housing. Because the truth of the matter is that California is majority an agricultural state. And that's where the majority of the water goes, and only to certain crops. So I mean, definitely
Almonds.
things need to change, but
Yeah, so
also, you
Tina,
know, where we put the
what's up?
money.
What I think is deceptive about that, what that comment, the comment that this guy made, he's really only referring to Los Angeles. So he's
Ah,
basically assuming Los Angeles is going to get its allocation, and then maybe they'll just starve, they'll starve the agriculture in Northern California, so there won't be any almond crops. He didn't get into that. He's just talking about, he's assuming that Los Angeles maintains its allocation because
oh,
so
okay.
Los
Yeah.
Angeles itself doesn't
The
have a
only
lot of
issue with
agriculture.
that is that the owners of the almond crops also bought the water rights alongside the five, and they divert that water, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. It was a very smart move by the family that owns pretty much all of that business. It's an incredible story. I think Vanity Fair covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
About,
Nicholas, haven't they been cut back also? They've been cut back
They have
somehow.
they have their ways of accessing it. It goes through their land.
it's going to get rough.
Another,
I
there
don't.
was another story, by the way, Tyler, on this
Hold
issue.
on. I mean,
The other day.
we can't just
Okay.
go ahead. That's worth contemplating. That point that the water supply of one of the world's largest metropolises runs through the land owned by a family who, you know, do you want? And this policy former water agency guy. This is why I used the COVID as a litmus example of, do you feel comfortable with the competency of your government agency representatives to manage crises that relate to water supply, food supply, COVID, what have you? And I think COVID was a sobering wake up call for a lot of people to realize that you might not want to put your trust of your life in the hands of your local board, city council members. So I don't mind putting, the price of parking tickets in the hands of the local community councils, but putting my water supply and food supply in the hands of those people, or medical issues, or is a bridge too far that I think people should contemplate, if they that the people who manage COVID are also going to be managing your water supply or food supply. And so I urge people to take control of it, and in doing so, you'll, as Ben clearly has done, you'll really start to focus on energy and food and water primarily. And when you start to do that, you really start to calculate and contemplate your geography as a factor, because different geographies are blessed or cursed or privileged with different degrees of water and food and energy. And it's like, it's like having the wind in your sails, or the wind, swimming upstream, in terms of you can live on the goddamn Mars if you want to, or the moon, but it's just very challenging. And it depends on how much effort you want to put into where you're living, I guess. But I just really encourage people take responsibility. I know that's a tall ask for Americans, particularly, but to take responsibility, because the the people that are managing your food and water and energy, are basically the crazy person at Starbucks, yelling at the barista about, the screwed up order. And I don't know that you want that person managing your food and water and energy. So just contemplate that. That's really my endless ongoing rant. But I have to hand it over. We're 5 minutes late because Messi is starting the Tech News Africa room. And so
Yes.
if she hasn't already, did she just open it?
I think she started already. She has gone there. I'm gonna pin on top now. Oh, by the way,
Okay.
before I change the pin, just click Californian. Just click on top of this room. There's an article there. Maybe one day it will come in handy. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna
And
change the pin
don't
now.
get me wrong. I really hope California figures out its water situation. To that note, I'm launching tomorrow my event for September 13th, Stockholm Impact Fest, all about trying to find using the latest tech to find solutions and showcase existing solutions for exactly these issues of water, food, energy, etc. And we need to do this as geeks and entrepreneurs and innovators and problem solvers, because the policymakers are going to fuck it up, and we can't rely or depend on them. They're ignoring the cries and the pleas and the protests of the youth uh, for now more than a couple years, who are begging them to get shit straight, and they're clearly not up to the task. So I think it's up to us kind of geeky engineer types to use our problem solving skills to get busy. And that's why I'm hosting and partnering with the municipality of Stockholm to try and make Stockholm the impact capital of the world. And they graciously are using my event series each year in early September as kind of the maypole to gather everybody around. So I'll be launching that tomorrow. Matter of fact, I will pin that to the top of the room right now for you. You'll get to see it before all the Stockholmers do tomorrow. And
And,
yes,
and Tyler, just quickly, I wanted to mention the governor of Arizona was just in Israel over desalination project. So
as he
apparently,
should be.
Arizona is going to get some Israeli technology. Yeah.
It's the best in the world. That's exactly where you want to be. There you go. Just pinned to the top of the room. Let's see what Stockholm Impact Fest 2022. There you go. Give that a look if you know anyone in the Nordics who wants to try and help figure out solutions for California's dire situation with drought. There we go. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.